Big things are happening this year at Toyota. Check out the totally redesigned Tacoma. The best just got better. Or check out a new Crown. With all-wheel drive and turbocharged models available, everyone deserves a Crown. And with industry-leading models like the adventurous RAV4, Toyota has you covered. Visit buyatoyota.com today to find special offers available now. Toyota. Let's go places.
I'm Ben Nadafafri, host of the history show The Last Archive, and I want to tell you about a new series we're running in our feed. It's called The Deadline. 6 essays written and read by Jill Lepore, the New Yorker writer, American historian, and founding host of our show. These are incredible essays on everything from the history of cryogenics to the Silicon Valley gospel of disruption. And at the end of each essay, I interview Jill about her craft as a writer. You can listen on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
At Leidos, a brilliant mind is smart, but a brilliant team is smarter. A ship that finds enemy subs is smart, but an autonomous fleet, that's smarter. Defending against cyber attacks? Smart. Stopping attacks before they start? Smarter. And using AI tools is smart, but integrating trusted mission AI into your technology is smarter. We're not just making technology solutions in national security and health. We're making smart smarter. Leidos.
Thanks, Scott Shannon, and glad you're with us. 800-941-SEAN if you want to be a part of the program as we continue our coverage. 118 days till Election Day, 69 days till early voting starts. We are awaiting President Biden's speech before the NATO summit. Fake news CNN describing it as a make or break moment for Biden in terms of can he show he is cognitively strong enough to be the leader of the free world. We'll get to all of that as it unfolds. But first, we're joined by the great senator from the great state of Arkansas. Senator Tom Cotton is back with us. Senator, how are you?
I'm very good, Sean. Thanks for having me back on with you.
Always great to have you. What do you make of, all of a sudden, I've been chronicling Joe Biden's cognitive decline prior to the 2020 election. Now, all of a sudden, after the debate, people just happen to notice all of it. And in spite of all of the evidence that have been out there pretty much on a daily basis, I find it somewhat laughable. On the other hand, it's pathetic because Biden's cognitive decline, cover-up, and deception is so broad-based within the Democratic Party, within the media mob. It's revolting to me.
Yeah, Sean, it is both laughable and pathetic. I was amused that Joe Biden yesterday started blaming the elites for trying to force him out of the nomination, when it's, in fact, it's the elites that got him the nomination in the first place, Sean. Remember, without Jim Clyburn in 2020, he probably wouldn't have been the nominee. And then the Democratic Party fell in line behind him as the only alternative to socialist Bernie Sanders. And again, in this election, they closed ranks. They shut down Robert F. Kennedy. They shut down Democratic Congressman Dean Phillips. They did everything they can to avoid Joe Biden having a primary opponent, when the polls have shown for years that the people, as usual, are much smarter and have more common sense than the elites. Even Democratic voters, much to say nothing of voters at large, thought Joe Biden was too old and too infirm to run for president. But the elites wanted to protect Joe Biden. They acted like a Praetorian Guard. He went through their primaries, and now they realize that they made a mistake. The Joe Biden we saw in that debate is no different from the Joe Biden that we saw over the last 6 months, Sean. They're not worried.
Last 6 months, pretty much the last 4 years. I mean, I saw this prior to the 2020 election, but I understand your point. It seems more, the decline, I guess, is more obvious, but it's been there the whole time.
It's been there the whole time, but it's just over the last 6 months the Democrats had their primaries, in which, again, they protected him from any competition, from any kind of opponent. So these Democratic elites that you see in Congress and the media, they're not all of a sudden surprised about a health problem, Sean. They're concerned about a polling problem. That is the only thing on their mind. They see Donald Trump shellacking Joe Biden all across the country and the potential for a Republican landslide. That's their concern.
Well, let me ask you this, because the Democrats had this big meeting today. And what was so interesting to come out of it was a guy like Jerry Nadler, who wanted over the weekend, had stated that he wanted Biden to be removed. And he comes out of the meeting with a change of heart and say, clearly the battle was won by Biden supporters. Now you have people, very powerful people like James Clyburn, I think maybe the most powerful, influential voice in the House for Democrats. Then you have the Congressional Black Caucus. Then you have AOC and the Squad. They've all solidly stayed behind Joe Biden. I think that is the real power base of the Democratic Party. And why would they not like Joe? He pretty much is a rubber stamp for every radical agenda item that they have. But they came out of the meeting today, and clearly a defeated Jerry Nadler, reverses himself and says, well, he's our guy. I tried, but, I'm going to support him. And that was not where he was over the weekend, which tells me that it did not go well for the people that were speaking ill of Joe Biden in this meeting. And then they've got a timing problem, in as much as they have to nominate virtually before, I believe it's August 5th or August 7th, whatever it is, and probably even before that, Joe Biden, which is less than a month. And if Joe Biden can survive a month, then he will be their official nominee and locked in, and, barring any real health issue or something catastrophic, he's going to be on the ballot in November.
Yeah, Sean, I think that it's not surprising these progressive Democrats want to keep Biden on the ticket. He has been a useful puppet for them for 3.5 years. This is part of the deal that Joe Biden cut with the party elite in 2020. Support him for the president, help him win, and he'll turn over policymaking to the radicals in the Democratic Party. And you've seen it on the border and immigration policy. You've seen it on abortion. You've seen it on spending. At every point, Joe Biden has turned over power to radicals in the Congress and in his administration. So, of course, the progressives want to keep him in office. And I got to say, Sean, even though, we've seen this decline now going back years, and the Democratic elites acted like the performance in the debate was shocking, even if Joe Biden were 25 years younger and healthy and energetic and vigorous, he still would have been a failed president, because all of his ideas are failures, all of his policies are failures. And that's the same thing that would happen if Kamala Harris replaced him, or Gavin Newsom, or Gretchen Whitmer, or anyone else. They are all aligned with the radical progressive policies that Joe Biden has allowed this party to implement.
I'm glad you're making that point, because I've been making that point, because this party is lockstep. It doesn't matter who is in that office, the policies will remain the same. And that means the policies of open borders, the horrible economic policies they put in place, defund, dismantle, no bail laws, that will remain in place. Horrible energy policies will remain in place. A horrible education system, because they're so beholden in this unholy alliance with the teachers unions. An American foreign policy that surrendered in the war against terrorism in the case of Israel, and pretty much lets our top geopolitical foes get away with anything and everything they want with no pushback at all. On top of that, a green agenda that wants to force electric vehicles in people's garages, whether they want them or not. And one that forces us to be more dependent on energy than we ever should be, considering our vast natural resources.
Yeah, on all those issues and more, Sean, you will not find a dime's worth of difference on the one hand between Joe Biden, and on the other hand, Kamala Harris or Gavin Newsom or Gretchen Whitmer or any other potential presidential contender for the Democrats. They are monolithically progressive, and the reason why they're going to keep Joe Biden in this position, aside from the logistical and practical consideration, is he has been a useful vessel and cipher to implement those radical policies.
I'll be at the Republican National Convention coming up next week. I'll be at the Democratic National Convention. Wish me luck in Chicago. and to get credentialed, I needed to prove who I was. There is the SAVE Act that is going on and being debated in the House. I believe it will be voted on next week. And House Democrats are fighting this bill that would simply require proof of U.S. citizenship to vote. Why are Democrats against voter ID? Why are they against voter signature verification? updated voter rolls, chain of custody command, partisan observers watching the voting all day, the vote counting up close all night. And why would they fight against the requirement of proof of citizenship to vote in our country?
Well, Sean, to ask the question reveals the answer. They're against it because they want those things to happen. They want illegals to be able to vote in elections and vote for Democrats. They want to have voter fraud that doesn't require voter identification and genuine signatures. And again, so you said you had to show who you were to get credentials for the conventions. And peace be upon you for going to the DNC, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. I'll take the blessing as much as many prayers as people want to offer. I'll take them.
But think about any time you hire a young producer or new audio tech, you have to verify that person is in the country legally to work. You have to look at, say, a passport or other documents on their I-9 immigration form. So why shouldn't you have to show a similar form when you want to vote? Voting is the central act of our democracy. If you have to show it to get a job in this country as an American citizen, shouldn't you have to be able to show it to register to vote? You have to do it every single time, but when you register, the Democrats are opposing this bill because they want to make it easier to cheat in our elections.
Let me ask you about a bill that you introduced called the Bureaucratic Overreach Review Act, which would review federal court decisions on laws, regulations, legal cases that used the recently overturned Chevron USA case versus Natural Resources Defense Council as the basis for their decisions. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so Sean, the Chevron doctrine, about 40 years old, said that if a Congress passes an ambiguous law, then the agencies are empowered to interpret it. And I think the facts of the case that reversed Chevron last week are a perfect example of just how bad that doctrine could be. So the fisheries regulator was empowered to put bureaucrats on fishing boats, taking away valuable space on a small boat. And they went further and said, not only are we going to take this valuable bed on your boat while you're trying to make a living catching fish, we're going to make you pay for the privilege of having our bureaucrat riding on your boat. A totally unreasonable interpretation. The Supreme Court was right to reverse it. What we need now is a thorough review of all the regulations that are on the books that only survive because a court earlier invoked the Chevron deference doctrine. Then we can even further rein in the administrative state that used this doctrine to expand its own power.
Yeah. So what does that mean? What does this mean on a practical basis for Americans? In other words, that it would require the Government Accountability Office to submit a report to Congress that identifies these things and require agencies to conduct a review of cases where the agency was a party of and accorded the Chevron case.
Yeah, Sean, so there's three practical effects that it could have. The first, obviously, is getting the agency off of its duff to go back and look at cases where it overreached the authority that Congress granted to it. Second, this will help private parties who may be harmed by these overreaching regulations to go back to court and say, under this now obsolete doctrine, this regulation survived, but the court needs to take a new look at it. Third, and maybe most fundamentally, it'll give us in Congress the list of where we need to do a better job. For years, Congress leaned on this crutch to pass vague, ambiguous laws that avoided hard trade-offs that could involve political risk and just punted problems to these executive agencies. So you had irresponsible members of Congress taking two bites of the apple, passing a vague, ambiguous law, saying they had solved the problem. Then 2 or 3 years later, when the agency makes a regulation that is overbroad and burdensome to Americans, they can condemn the agency, so they get to have their cake and eat it too. So there should be many levels of review of these older and onerous regulations.
Well, please keep us up to speed on all of this. We appreciate your time. Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. Thank you, sir.